Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. My name is Parag Madawar. I'm going to be your host today. I'm the SASE Manager of Professional Programs, and we hope that each of you and your loved ones are safe, healthy, and happy this afternoon. And we're so happy that you've joined us as we have another great guest speaker joining us today. So first off, for those of you who have joined us before for a webinar, thank you for coming back. And those of you who it's your first time, we hope you have a wonderful experience today and continue to join us on these monthly webinars. What I'd like to do as we go forward is first talk about what SASE Pro is. This series is brought to you by the professional arm of the Society of Asian Scientists and Engineers. And our mission is to unlock leadership potential of APIs in STEM. Through multicultural soft skill development, ERG development, and broader awareness. We believe this will increase the business impact of the Asian professional community and strengthen representation at higher levels. Just to dial it back a little bit though, when you look at SASE overall, SASE as a Society of Asian Scientists and Engineers, we were founded in 2007 by Procter & Gamble with the first collegiate chapter on Carnegie Mellon University's campus. A few years later, we had our first national conference, and really the primary focus for SASE over the first decade has been on collegiate, and now we've got well over 100 chapters and is growing rapidly. The professional arm of SASE started a few years back with a new strategy adopted by the board in 2018. Last year, we had a fantastic training at national conference with well over 300 professionals in attendance for the 3-day experience. And this year, there was a creation of the Manager of Professional Programs role, which is my role. And we regularly engage with over 50 companies, and we are planning our virtual conference, our first one virtual, as everything is these days, for this October. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. But why? Why does SASE Pro matter and why does it exist? Overwhelmingly, most of you know, our Asian community in STEM does fantastically in college, and we are, we perform well and we get jobs at companies' entry levels. But there's a large leadership gap for professionals, about 3x when you compare senior leader levels versus entry levels. And so that's what we are here for. That's what we're aiming to solve for. And we believe that the gap is due to cultural values and behaviors that are slightly different than the Western corporate the Western corporate environment. And so it's really about skill building for those culturally adaptive behaviors and values to really get us in a position where we can deliver our fullest. Lots of words on this slide, but there's lots of reasons why individuals and companies both benefit by getting involved with SASE Professional. And so you can read there, a lot more on our website as well, but this is what we aim to do as an organization. So with that, that's a lot of words, but I wanted to just give a brief introduction of what SASE Pro is. I'd like to introduce Uday here in a moment to talk through leadership competency. But before we start that, I want to just do a couple of housekeeping items. This webinar is being recorded and will be uploaded to our YouTube channel. So please feel free to adjust your camera settings as you see fit. The content will be about 45 minutes followed by a Q&A. If you have any questions during the webinar, you can ask them and we'll do our best to get to as many as possible. Now, we're going to have some interactive aspects. Uday is going to do some polls and some other questions, and we're going to do something a little different this time. We're going to use Slido. Slido is a polling functionality that we're testing out for our upcoming conference, and so we're going to be doing a little bit of Slido and a little bit of Zoom, and we ask that you just bear with us as we dry run this technology for our conference. Uday will give a little bit more instruction on how to log into Slido, but it's a pretty neat technology for those of you who haven't used it before. Lastly, get your pen and paper out, take notes. Uday's done a ton of research on this area and is really drawing on a wealth of experience in presenting this to us and laying out a pathway or a plan on how we can craft out our own leadership development plan. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Uday Sheth.
Parag, thank you so much. Just do a technical check. Parag, are you seeing my screen and hearing me okay?
I am. Thank you so much.
Excellent. All right. Well, listen, I'm really delighted to be here with all of you guys today. Thank you to Parag and the whole SASE team for organizing this, and thanks to all of you that have attended to take the time and listen to some of my thoughts. Fabian, I saw you put a note into the chat. I'm glad you're with us. I went down the participants, saw some very familiar names from SASE and from P&G, and then I saw some new names. So I'm just really delighted at the mix of folks that we have here on the line. All right, so today we're going to talk about this question, the central question around how to grow your leadership competency in order to grow your leadership impact. Okay, so I've assumed a couple of things here, right? First, that all of you want to continue growing. I think, growth mindset, we can talk about that a lot, but growing first and foremost, your impact and your contributions to your organization should be central to all of you. And if your organization values impact and contributions, all the rest will come. Salary raises, promotions, hierarchy, and all the rest. The challenge tends to be, you will get told by somebody, hey, you're doing great, we want to see more leadership. And sometimes the conversation stops there, okay? I've been on the receiving end of that when I was younger in my career. Honestly, I've seen lazy managers use that expression because they don't give specificity. And, it's unhelpful to be asked to grow leadership without any insight or clear understanding upon how you can actually act upon that. So today, we're going to spend a little time talking about context, a little bit about leadership, and a recap of some of the barriers that we have found to be leadership gaps for Asians. I'm going to introduce this idea of a competency framework, and then I want to help you take that to action for each and every one of you, which may be different, but it's something you can take away and act upon if you choose so tomorrow. Okay, so first I'm going to just share a little bit of personal background. I'm going to draw on my background and tell a few stories about my leadership journey as I introduce some of the different competencies, but I'm Uday. I am a second-generation Indian American. My mom and dad immigrated here in the 50s. I was born and raised in Texas, so I identify not just as an Indian American, but as a native Texan. And I am an engineer, a chemical engineer from Rice University way back in the day. I joined P&G straight out of school in Cincinnati, Ohio. That's where I'm calling in from today. And I'll just share some of the different parts of my career. I mean, I spent a majority of my time in P&G's fabric care organization that's working on laundry detergents, fabric softeners, and the rest. And because I'm doing R&D, it's all about new and improved product and package design. So I spent a number of years working on the US business located in Cincinnati. I actually had a very long run working on the international businesses. So I spent about 5 years, still based in Cincinnati, but helping start our laundry business in India and across much of Asia. That actually turned into a couple of expatriate assignments for me. I spent 3 years in the Philippines, which was a really fabulous experience working on emerging markets, so Asia, Latin America, Middle East, Africa, and laundry products around all of those countries and for those consumers. And then I spent 5 years located in Beijing, China, where we have a major R&D center running our innovation portfolio for fabric care across Greater China and South Asia. Okay. I came back to Cincinnati about 11 or 12 years ago. I spent some time in the corporate function, really thinking about how P&G innovates and innovating how we innovate. And then I ended my career with 5 years in beauty care R&D, working on personal care, skin care, and hair care. During those last years, I was very involved in P&G's ERG. I led that for a couple of years, and I was involved in all different aspects of that operation. And then I retired a couple of years ago as a director of R&D, and been doing a lot of stuff since then, but one of the major roles I've been playing is a volunteer executive advisor for SASE. So that's a little story about kind of where I've been and where I come from. I'm going to start because I'd like to make this as interactive as we can in these strange times. and ask you all to go ahead and load up Slido. So on your browser or your phone, go to slido.com. There is an event code you'll see on the left side of the screen, 82748. So I'm going to leave this up for just a second while you all navigate there, 82748. And then I'm going to just do a first poll, which is an icebreaker, okay? So this is just for fun because it's just curious to me where we've got people coming in from today. So I'm actually going to scoot over to Slido here real quick so we can all watch this populate. And yes, so we got people from my home state here, which is awesome. We got Ohioans, got some Pennsylvanians, Connecticut, Massachusetts. And again, I'll just let this populate here for a minute just to get a sense of where we got folks. Awesome to see the diversity of participation. And as Parag said, I hope you and your families, your organizations are all staying well in these kind of crazy times. I've been talking a lot over the last couple of days to high school and college students who are trying to make big decisions around jobs and college decisions, and it's really awkward that you can't actually physically go and see the places that you're thinking about joining. So I really empathize with the complexity. So cool. Okay, and I'm just going to guess, I haven't used this, that we have a lot of people from Texas because that's in the center and it's in big font. So Yahoo, that's good. Good to see. Okay, so we're going to scoot forward to the next question. Let me see how I do this. And this is actually more relevant to today. So I gave the story about, being asked to grow leadership and, maybe having somebody, you wanting to do that or somebody asking you that that's an area for growth. I would love, in your own words, just to tell me what's the biggest skill area you want to grow as a leader, in your own words, however whatever focus of that has for you. So go ahead and just throw that in. I think it should be live. Yes, okay, I start to see some things coming in. We see presence, we see a lot of influence, high-performing teams, communication, collaboration. I guess this is scrolling off, Parag, so I'll just kind of let you watch as things come in. Management, so defending your own thoughts. Corporate 360 thinking, there's some communication, patience, very good, big picture. So again, I'm just gonna let this pause for a minute, just get a sense. Commanding the room, very interesting. Strategic thinking, good. Any more? We got a few more trickling in. Encouraging people to work harder, right? Impact, influence. Okay, great. I'm going to keep moving. Keep putting your thoughts in here because we are going to harvest this later. So I do want to have everyone who's willing to share. It's anonymous, so we don't know who's sending it in, so that's fine. I'm just trying to get a flavor for what's going on. So you see a whole variety of things. You see a few themes emerging. Saying what needs to be said without burning bridges. Love it. So let me go back to my presentation. See if I can do this. Mucking it up. Okay, shout Parag if you're not seeing what you want to be seeing, but I'm going to scoot on. So you got a good flavor for that. I was really curious about this idea of leadership and giving people a framework and a common language so that they could be more pinpointed and directed around where to grow. So I did some homework. I'm an R&D guy. It's all about research. So, I started my research where we tend to all start on the internet. By the way, don't believe everything you read on the internet, but I did start with Google and I said, well, let me type in leadership and see what I get back. Okay, 2.7 billion responses. I have way too much Netflix that I want to watch, so I was not willing to go through that many. So I decided to start curating it a bit. I said, well, let me look at frameworks. Okay, 500 million, still kind of a lot. I said, well, this is a Society of Asian Scientists and Engineers, so let me filter by Asian leadership framework. 83 million. And we're all technical people. Obviously this framework can be universal, but let's get really laser focused on Asian STEM leadership framework. Okay, 21 million hits. So I read through all of those, okay? It was really, I didn't really read all 21 million, but I read a few of them. I did that as a way to get some homework, learned a little bit about what's out there, what's been thought and done. It's, all over the place, quite frankly. And I'll be honest, like many things on the internet, not that helpful, but it was instructive to lay context. Okay, here's what was really more interesting is, our very targeted work to go and talk to executives, Asians who are successful, who have made it to high levels in their organization. This is work led by Dennis Hirotsu, who's another executive advisor for SASE. Many of you might have heard Dennis talk about his insights in the last webinar. And if you didn't, you'll be able to go back and watch that at a later point. Parag will get you those details later. But let me just recap a couple of things that he shared. So, through our interviews with executives, we found that there were some common factors that limited Asians from rising to leadership levels. Parag mentioned already at the beginning a 3x gap between the representation of Asians at the entry level versus the executive level. So one of them is lack of savvy around the politics of an organization and the organization itself. The second is cultural deference to authority. The third is less than effective communication and influencing skills. And the fourth is aversion to risk-taking in their career aspects. Okay, so this is maybe 40 or 50 different people that we interviewed. We would love to continue adding to this body of knowledge. So if you have an Asian executive in your organization that you think could contribute, please let Parag know, let me know. We'd love to arrange a small talk with them just to find out, how they were able to succeed in your organization, okay? The other thing that we found is that, those executives were able to overcome some of those barriers by really learning the cultural agility required to connect between their values and staying true to the values and Asian identity, but really demonstrating behaviors that were more connected to what was valued and acceptable in a US workplace as opposed to an Asian cultural context. And you see some of the cultural values here. I mean, Asians don't have unique rights on those. Many non-Asians demonstrate these values, but using those behaviors in the workplace in a way that is conducive to impact and contribution is really what we're trying to work with Asians on. Now, what this, if you take all of that, what you kind of find on the outside, what you get from the interviews that we did with executive, there's a few kind of key points here. Number one, there is a universe of leadership competencies. I mean, you typed in a bunch of them just a few minutes ago, like all over the place. You can go look at 21 million hits on Google. You'll find, 21 million more, right? So there's no shortage of like, here are the things you need to do to become a good leader. What we've tried to do is overlay on that. What are the real and perceived barriers that Asians face in the workplace? And what have executives that have succeeded found in terms of their ability to have cultural agility and skill development to really make a difference in how they've grown in their career. And those things have really created this framework that we're going to talk through here in a moment. It creates a common language, a common understanding, and it's going to guide some of our leadership training and programming that we're undertaking via SASE. And a framework in and of itself is only part of the story. I mean, that really then has to be activated for each one of you to come up with a training plan and a practice plan. It's not just about going to training, but it's actually putting it into practice, tailored for each and every one of you based on where you are in your career. And that's what it's required to unlock true potential as for each of you as leaders. Okay, so I'm going to pause and take a break. We're going to turn to the actual leadership framework now and go through that in a little bit more detail. I love this quote. I mean, it's really all about leadership really being the skill set for the long term. And here it is, right? This is the framework that we came up with that is culturally focused on Asian gaps. We kind of got it down to 5. I mean, I think Fabian and others have told me that, the mind can only remember 3 to 5 things. So I started with 10 or 12 and through some conversations with folks, distilled it down to 5 major competency spaces. Again, tailored to the gaps that most exist towards Asian. And Sarah, who is on the call, so I'll pay her off. I mean, she really helped me from a graphic design standpoint, put this into something very visually compelling. So Sarah, thank you for all that work and late nights. Sarah described to me one of the metaphors that she used when she came up with this is this idea of a camera lens, which I love because it provides real focus, right? That's what a camera does. It provides focus. It allows you to zoom in, zoom back out, depending on the skill that you may be trying to work on, whether it's broad or whether you're really trying to pinpoint a specific behavior. So I love the metaphor of the camera lens. Hopefully you'll kind of remember that when you see this, this imagery going forward. I'm going to dive into each one of these for just a minute and, I'll probably tell some stories about my own journey as we go. And then we'll come back at the recap of all 5 and I'll open it up for questions. So if you do have questions, and Parag, if you can do this in the background, Slido has a question and answer element. So if you can activate that, Parag, and people can be adding their questions, you can upvote, downvote, so that way we can come back and find the questions that have the most interest of the group that's listening in today. Okay, so let's start with leading yourself for growth. And my story here is very personal. I told you I grew up in Texas. I was a second generation Indian American. I grew up in a pretty much all white, all black community. All my friends were non-Asian. I was like really into football, Dallas Cowboys, of course. They were winning Super Bowls left, right, and center in those years. So I thought, coming out of that experience in university, that I was very fluent in Western ways. I don't speak the Indian language very well. I mean, English is my native language. And so when I entered the workplace, I'm like, I'm not Asian. I'm as white as they come, right? I just happen to have brown skin. What I realized actually is that I had a lot of Asian tendencies, and they come out in very subtle ways. They're the marriage of my cultural upbringing as an Indian with my environment, which was very Western. And one of the big insights that I had, and this evidenced itself early in my days at P&G, and I got feedback from coaches and mentors, is really understanding the match between my intentions as a leader or as a worker and my impact. And sometimes the intent and the impact didn't really match up. And looking at that difference was an opportunity for a lot of self-growth, okay? And that's what this competency is all about. It's all about starting with the main focus of the self. It's balancing the skill profile, which, Asians come with a really strong technical focus, great perseverance and grit, typically, amazing ambition to kind of make a difference and to grow the company, grow the organization, grow yourself in terms of your position in the company. But the gap tends to be, and whether you're first generation, second, third, or fourth, I will tell you it's there, is understanding how cultural behaviors are perceived by others around you and how they may or may not match up to what's expected from the leadership of your company in terms of behavior that's related to success. Okay, so it's just being aware of that. And, there's a lot of specific skills within that. This is not a complete list by any means, but, just raising your self-awareness, really having the right personal mindset and purpose around what you're doing in the company, growing your fluency skills, cultural agility, working on your personal brand. These are all the kinds of things that are happening inside of this competency. Okay, so that's number 1. I'm going to move on, right? This is the second competency, is all around leading effective 360-degree relationships. Now, when I was a young manager at P&G, I thought, like maybe many of you, that like the ticket to success is put my head down, do really good work. Somebody, who knows who that was, somebody is going to notice and reward me for that. But just put your head down and get your work done, right? And yes, of course, that's important early in your career to develop competency and demonstrate technical proficiency. But what I had missed, and the 2 lessons I learned were, number 1, building a network is really important at all stages of your career, but particularly early, because all problems have been solved everywhere. And who you know is a multiplier, an exponential multiplier to what you know. So the more people you know, the more effective and impactful you can be. The second lesson is around the really critical role of building relationships with bosses, right? Again, I was under the assumption the boss would look at what I was doing, and if I was doing a good job, I'd be rewarded for that. And yes, of course, that's true. But really getting to know your boss on a deeper level. And I'm not talking about going out on the golf course with them, but just, getting to know them as people, right? And more importantly, getting to know like what's important to them, what's causing them stress, where are they seeing conflict, and how can the work that you're doing orient more to support the broader picture of your team, and doing the same with their boss, your 2-up or even 3-up boss. The more you can do that, the more effective you can steer your own work in a technically proficient way. Okay, so here the idea of relationships is all about self and others, together. So yes, Asians have strengths in delivering core work, doing some great problem solving, but really building relationships, not just with your boss, but with your peers. If you have direct reports working through, building relationships with them and getting to know what makes them tick and how to motivate and get more insight out of them. Even managing outside the company. Many of you have to manage resources and networks and other stakeholders outside of your organization. And managing external resources is a whole nother set of relationships that have to be built. That's why we use the 360 moniker here. So again, a lot of skills, that are here. This isn't universal. So, being an effective listener, authentic listener, developing trust, being comfortable with giving and receiving feedback, not debating it, but accepting it as a gift and really trying to internalize, take action upon it, managing your professional network, right? I will tell you, I didn't really get after that until I was very late in my career. And I think I could have been more effective had I been more attentive to that earlier in my career. So that's competency number 2. Competency number 3 is around leading impactful communications, right? I always got feedback in my first 15 or 20 years at P&G that I was a great communicator. I was really great with peers. I was really good with my team. It was important to me for them to know what was going on and, more importantly, why it was going on so that they could orient their work accordingly. So that was important to me as a leader. Now, that's okay, and I got good feedback for that, but over time you have to shift. My Achilles heel actually opened up later in my career, because I started getting feedback that my executive communication was not effective, right? I wasn't crisp enough. My written communications weren't really getting to the point. Verbally, body language wise, I wasn't delivering the kind of presence, the kind of communication that was really effective for the most senior people in the company. And so again, knowing your audience is important. And that was something I had to get some coaching on, do a lot of work on myself to really, unlock and open up new opportunities for myself in my career. Now, the focus here is around presence. Like, how are you present in a room, in a meeting, in a conversation, one-on-one, right? So Asians are great at communicating. This is even my profile, communicating facts on a technology. Here's the data. We are exceptional at, because we're technical masters and analytical problem solvers. But the gaps tend to be all over the place. Sometimes some Asians are too verbose. Sometimes they're too terse. Many times not clear, sometimes passive or not enthusiastic. And I will tell you, my personal experience with Asians in my organization is sometimes they didn't take a point of view. I'm like, well, thank you for the data. And if I make you king or queen for just a moment, what the heck do you want to do next, right? Do not ask me to make that decision for you, because you disempower yourself by not at least offering up the idea of here's where I think, Uday, we should go next. So those are the skills that I think need to be built. Obviously, leadership presence is a big part of it. Verbal, nonverbal communications is a big part of it. So, 95% of what we communicate is actually not in the words that we use, but it's in the nonverbal. There's an interesting fact for you to ponder. And obviously what you do in writing, right? Sometimes you don't meet a manager. I had so many experiences where people would tell me they knew my work and I had never met them once. But it's because something I had written had gotten moved around the company and they had formed an impression. Maybe a good one, maybe a not so good one, but it was through what I had written. So I just tell you that whatever you write, you never know where it's gonna go. That's space number 3. The 4th is about leading high performance organizations, right? So, again, in my journey, I delivered lots of great results. I had to manage small teams. I had to manage large teams. I had a couple of personal lessons, right? I was super fortunate early in my career because of some circumstances. I had a relatively large team 4 or 5 years in the company, I had a team of 8 or 9 people, which is kind of unusual for a person at that level in their career. So that's good. I got a lot of practice because, you know, you don't learn in school how to be a manager, right? That's usually learned on the job and with people around you. And I had to make a mental shift because I started like, oh my gosh, I have all these people that report to me. It's an amazing amount of data that I can create in my organization. So, but I had to shift from treating the people that work for me as data machines, you know, go run this experiment, report back, to, hey, you know, this is what we're trying to do. Maybe you have an idea that I haven't told you or asked you. Maybe you have a way to make things better, faster, or different. And that might make us more powerful. So that was a real mental shift I had to go through as a young manager at P&G. As a more senior leader at P&G, it was more complex. I'd have hundreds of people in my organization. They were scattered all around the world, literally, in every continent almost. I had to manage people that didn't see each other every day, even though they saw me often. How do you take a dispersed organization with many different functional priorities? How do you create a common vision? And so that everyone's pointing in the same direction, but giving enough freedom that each of your teams or sub-teams can have some freedom on how to get there, right, within some boundaries. That's a bit of a challenge, and that emerges as you grow into, you know, into higher levels of responsibility. So here the main focus is around teams, not the individual. And the strengths that, you know, we have to balance is, okay, we're the model worker, right? We deliver our results very competently, but are we as skilled, or can we create the skill to create a team when one doesn't exist, or when you enter into an existing team, lead it to deliver something bigger, faster, more breakthrough, with the emotional intelligence to really understand how to get the most out of every player on the team, whether you're the boss or whether you're just a peer leader, doesn't matter, okay? So again, a lot of skills that I heard before: selling, influencing, really being able to speak with confidence and clarity, really having the acumen about how your organization works and the culture, right? Who's the decision maker? Who advises the decision maker? And how do you get that person on board, or at least understand the factors that are involved? This is, you know, back to building relationships. You know what your boss is thinking about and rewarded on. A lot of what you present to him or her can factor that in, because you know what's going to be in their mind as they're judging or thinking through a decision or an opportunity. Okay. All of these bring us to really the last one, and I just think this is, honestly, they're all equally important, but I'm particularly interested in this one because, again, it goes back to this idea of impact and contribution, which is what most organizations tend to reward their people on, right? P&G is a contribution-driven culture. Once you get into the company, whatever degree, whatever school, whatever gender, whatever race, doesn't really matter. It's your contributions and your delivery of results that do. And I don't know all of your companies, but I'm going to guess that is a very strong mindset with your leaders. So we all have responsibilities, right? And, you know, keeping things running, keeping the wheels turning, as I call it, is super important. But in and of itself, that's not really sufficient, because I think every organization expects every person to keep things running effectively. The results that really get noticed are transformational contributions, game changers, things that are just surprising and unexpected. I mean, at P&G, it's all about, you know, new products that radically change and make better the way of doing a consumer job. I worked in laundry a long time, so form changes from powder detergents to liquid detergents, which are just that much more effective and convenient, to more recently unit dose, or the Tide Pods type of product. In beauty care, you know, 2-in-1 shampoos or anti-aging skincare creams. In our paper sector, thin-shaped diapers. More recently, if you look at our oral care business at P&G, you know, we're doing power toothbrushes that are Bluetooth connected, so you get instant feedback to improve your brushing outcomes, right? So, you know, technology changes over the years, but the idea that you can be game changing in how you approach the product that your customer is intending to buy is always there. Now that's Proctor, right? I mean, every business and every industry is different. You can look at music, right? I mean, I'm back to the days of cassette tapes and then, you know, CDs and vinyl records and then streaming and now Spotify or Pandora or whatever platform you use. So music has transformed, and someone or some small team or some organization moved society from an S-curve to a new S-curve of innovation. Clean energy is going on in the oil and gas industry right now. I'm a Tesla fanatic, so you can look at electric cars as being, you know, the new S-curve. And by the way, I don't know what Tesla's doing today, but as of yesterday, Elon Musk, fourth richest man in the world, you know, the value of his company is bigger than all other US automakers combined. You can argue that's not well deserved, but you know what? It is what it is, as people are prone to say right now. And you cannot take away that the whole platform of electric cars is transformative to transportation right now. So I give you those examples because I want you to think about, in your part of the world, you may not be doing things that are quite that big, but in your part of the world, how can you do game-changing work that gets noticed by those that are assessing contributions, okay? So again, this focus of this competency is all around results. It goes going beyond our typical strengths of delivering operational needs and really having the strategic thinking to deliver transformational results. Typically that involves a ton of complexity, a ton of risk, a ton of uncertainty, and that's always there. And you just have to take that on and still be able to drive a program and be able to adjust and pivot the program as you learn. So the kinds of skills, again, not universal, you know, having strategic thinking ability, really having the acumen to understand your technology and your market and what might be shifting in the landscape. You know, an innovation that is not ready for prime time today, give it a year or two and it may be really well suited. Okay, knowing your customer, whoever it is that's buying your product or service, and what makes him or her tick and what makes him or her more interested, that's very fundamental to driving transformation. Right? It may not be what they tell you, but it may be something you observe from them. So that is the fifth and final space. And you know, I'll come back to kind of the overall framework. There's these 5 spaces. These are selected out of the universe of leadership competencies because we think these are the ones that are most needed and most focused for Asian leaders that are trying to grow to higher and higher positions of impact and influence in the organization. Okay, I know I talk fast, so I'm going to pause for just a second. I threw a lot at you. I am going to open it up in just a second for questions. So let's see, Parag, I'm gonna do my trick here and go back over to Slido. Okay, let me see if I can get this done. Let me go over to the Q&A. Okay, here we go. Parag, you've been monitoring this, so do you want to just serve up a couple of questions for me to tackle?
Yeah, we'll just start right up there at the top. So what would you recommend a more junior employee do to be more assertive if their work has already been recognized by senior leaders, but they seem stuck career-wise?
Okay. So what I'm hearing from that is you feel like you've made an impact and a contribution. In fact, one evidence of that is somebody's recognized you with something, an award or some kudos or some public recognition, yet career-wise you're not moving. And that, I think, is not an uncommon thing. I will tell you, I was always feeling like I should have been promoted way before I actually got promoted. So, you know, that's, I think, a very normal thing. I think the things to do is, one, keep at it. Look for the next big transformational thing. I will tell you, again, I'm sorry to use so many P&G examples. That's what I know best. Sustained contributions is an important thing. I don't know how many meetings I've sat in. We judge a person and say, hey, that person's doing really super work. And, you know, maybe we should give them another opportunity or a bigger opportunity. And one of the questions is, how do we know that just wasn't a one-off? You know, how do we know we just didn't have them in the right place at the right time? And yes, they delivered, and we don't want to take away from that, but we want to make sure that they can do that sustainably time and time again. So not that you have to finish like 5 more years on another program, but we want to see evidence of the behaviors that we want to see. So just continue to get after it. And I think the other thing is engage in a dialogue with somebody that's trusted. Like, hey, I feel like, I'm operating, I have this feedback, what else is in the conversation around me? It's at creating that shared pool of understanding, the relationship competency. Asking for feedback. You may or may not like to hear some of the things. I've had those conversations. I can tell you it was one of those conversations where finally came onto the table that everyone loves you, but there's a real worry, Uday, about your ability to communicate with executives. And it was the first time in several decades that had been raised to me. And I was a little surprised and shocked. I'm like, why did it take so long for somebody to point this out? But I quickly shifted to like, okay, I'm not arguing with you. How do we move beyond that? How do I develop my skills so that whomever is making that assessment becomes more comfortable? And then we move forward in a positive manner. What's next?
Wonderful. Thanks, Uday. Next one is, how do you think about language barriers or accents? And what have you found to be the best way to work on this?
Oh, that's a great question. Okay, so first I'm going to say, I have generally found leaders to be somewhat forgiving on accents. As long as you can be well understood, having an accent alone is not a barrier. Unless, and I've dealt with people that have very, very thick accents, and it is simply hard to understand the point that is being made. So if you just have an accent and you don't get feedback that I didn't follow, I don't understand, I wouldn't worry too much about it. If you do, there are vocal coaches. You can ask your company to support that. I mean, at P&G, I had actually enlisted vocal coaches for a few people specifically on this question. I mean, I manage people in China, in India, in Latin America who had they weren't native English speakers. They had very thick accents. And I judge that to be holding back their effectiveness. And so we had people work with them. And it's, vocal coaches are out there. They're really not that expensive, and they can be very, very effective. Sometimes it's not the accent. Maybe it's something else. Maybe it's the quality of thinking, and you're misattributing it to language or accent. And I'll tell you the last thing I will do, because I've worked with so many people for whom English is not a native language, write stuff down, right? I am a native English speaker. I get confused in high pressure meetings. I have stuff written down. I have my talking points in front of me. By the way, I have them in front of me right now. Okay. So have it, and you won't get lost. You can be very on point. You can be very brief and crisp. And if you're worried about language, you can write the words or the phrases down that you want to use. And that will reduce that as a barrier if it is one. Okay, one more.
Awesome. For the framework, these 5 competency levels, do you work on them in sequence or in parallel, or how do you think about that with where you are in your career?
Okay, Parag, did you ask that question? Because you asked me that like 5 times already. So
somebody else mentioned it too. I put it in there, but somebody else put the same question.
Oh, that's awesome. And
it's not just me.
They're all important. We're going to turn in a minute to like, how do you make this personal for each of you? But I think you can work on them all at the same time. You can work on them in sequence. I think the order that I share them is usually the order that I coach younger people, because unless you're have high self-awareness and you've really gotten comfortable and confident, it's really hard to do some of the higher order things. So I think you need to start with yourself and with relationships, and then with some of the rest, because you don't get impact unless the other things come along. Right? You can work on multiples at the same time if it's very targeted, and that's fine. And I will make, and this is a higher level of sophistication than I wanted to get into today, but these are not like independent. I mean, it's just like going to school. There are going to be cross-disciplinary things. I had a lot of thought around like the idea of influence. Which pedal, which competency does it fit in? Honestly, it fits in all of them in a certain way. So, then I thought, should I have a 6th one called influence? And it just got complicated. So you're going to find some high order concepts that cut across all of them. How do you influence in a relationship is different than how do you influence in a large team, and different than how do you influence on a major proposal to transform your company. Influence is an important skill in there, but it cuts across multiple of them. So I don't want you to think in a siloed mindset that these are completely independent of one another. Okay. Parag, do we have time for one more, or should I keep moving?
Yeah, I think we can do one more. Okay. How do you get this executive or leadership training? Where do you find it?
Great question. I think there's many ways to do it. Number one, within your company, assuming that you have a large enough company to have a learning and development organization, they will be offering very basic skills in leadership and all of the areas that I mentioned or more. So that's number one. And that will be designed for the broad audience, not just for Asians, but that's a place to start. You can go to organizations that specialize in helping Asians grow. SASE is one of them. There are others. I'm not judging who's better or worse, but they're out there, and you can enlist with them, you know, Ascend and Elevate. Fabian runs some of this in his consultancy. Leap is out there. So I don't mean to leave out anybody, but there's a lot of them. We partner with all of them when we deliver training through SASE. And then, you know, honestly, if you have very pinpointed skills, there's a million things out there, from TED Talks to individuals that do talks. It's really just limited by your creativity and your perseverance to go find the content. And honestly, the last one I would say is ask people around you that know you. You will gain a lot. If you find somebody that has a skill that you're looking to get and may be good at it, just say, hey, I noticed you're really good at this thing and it's a thing I'm trying to work on. You know, can you give me some coaching? Can you tell me how you're so good at it? How did you get there? You know, offer to be a mentee of them if they're willing, and maybe you'll learn some things in the context of your company.
Yep. You know, Uday, we've got still 15 more minutes in total, so I think we can do one more.
Okay, that's fine.
I like this one. How do you work on strategic thinking skills?
Oh my, that is a really interesting one. I'm going to keep it very brief. Way. I think this is the person that formulated the question. First, Parag, I'm going to tell you that Dennis Hirotsu, who I think is not on the call, so I can give him work. He does a really good strategic thinking workshop. He did it at Proctor, and I know he's done it a few times. It's really, you know, there's different levels. Sometimes I think people get very confused with information and data, and they're not able to kind of clearly understand what out of all of that is most essential to move forward to whatever the big picture goal is. That's number one, right? So really connecting between where your organization's goal is, your boss's boss, the CEO, if that's relevant, and the data that's in front of you, because you're just going to see a small piece of the company, right? And developing the skills to understand what out of all of that is most essential and important to move forward, so that I can filter the signal from the noise. That becomes the essence of the skill. It's a very difficult skill to teach. It's one that I tend to do in practice as I coach people one-on-one. And a lot of it is, okay, you're saying this is the data, thank you, and this is what you do, thank you. And have you thought about the consequence if you move in that direction? And if you thought about what that would do against this major trend or this major shift in society that's happening, right? For example, anyone who right now says, I want to start a bricks and mortar retail store, I'd be like, that's really interesting. You may have a really interesting idea, but are you kind of looking at the world around you and what's happened in the last 3 to 5 years, and then what's happened in the last 6 months? You know, maybe that's an idea that is not strategically well placed in today's environment, and you should consider some alternatives. I think that's not a great answer, Way. I'm sorry, but you know, we can talk offline if you'd like some more. And Parag, maybe you get Dennis. If there's a lot of interest from the group, we can get Dennis to come and do one of his talks.
I think that's a great idea. It is a challenging question because, as you say, it is very relevant to the specific piece that you are working on versus being a broadly applicable, do this, then this, then this, then this. So, yeah.
Hey, Parag, I'm going to do one quick one because I'm just scrolling down the rest just to say, there's one about practicing and how do you practice that doesn't make you feel or appear less capable. Great question. Practicing is hard. It feels awkward. It may look awkward. I will tell you, the place I practice the absolute most is within my ERG. The affinity group, we call it at Proctor, there were people I knew really well. I'd known them for years. And when I was working on stuff, I'd say, hey, I'm working on this thing. And when I do a little talk with this group, you're going to see me try some new things on, and it feels weird. And, you know, at the end, tell me if it was good or not. And sometimes, you know, I get like, oh my God, that was like very strange. I'm like, okay, well, I probably missed the mark. Sometimes we're like, no, that was great. That's different than normally what we see and hear from you. And it built my confidence that in a real meeting with my real boss or with a real team, I could practice that same skill, get over some of the awkwardness, but also feel confident that it would be impactful in the way that I wanted it to. So this is where I'm going to put a huge plug into the ERGs that hopefully you have. And if you don't, here's a transformation. Go start one. Go drive it, right? That could be a very interesting thing for you to contribute and be known for, is moving your ERG to a higher level of proficiency. Okay, I am going to keep moving. I'm mindful of time. Let's see if I can do this and get back to my screen. All right, so the last section is all, oh, sorry, I did have a couple more polls, and I think these are going to come in Zoom. So I want to start making this personal to you. So as you think about now the competencies, at the beginning, I asked you to type in just randomly what you're working on. I would like you now to kind of come into Zoom and select which of these are your strengths. You have strengths. I don't want to start this from a deficit model. Each of you has strengths, and I want you to think about where your strengths are biggest. Hopefully you're not going to say all 5. That would be a little bit, maybe more than it should be. But start, because then you can start by like taking advantage and honing these strengths to a higher level and using that to make impact. Let's just take a minute and see where things go.
We've got about 40 people who have voted so far. They're still rolling in, but it looks like leading yourself for growth is the clear winner at the moment.
That's great. That's what I said. That's foundational. So I think you want to start there. If you're not sticking that might be some, give you a clue on where you can spend some personal time. This is actually interesting. I didn't know what to expect. So this is fascinating.
Yeah, actually, it's going in sequential order. Interestingly enough, right?
Yeah, right on.
Fantastic. Okay. So I think we can end this poll so that everybody can see it.
Okay, great. Thank you. And then I'm going to scoot on to the next one. Yep. And I'm going to ask the other question, which is, what's the competency that you feel or that somebody's telling you is your single biggest flat spot? And here you only get to pick one, okay? So that will give you a clue on where you want to be, focusing. As you fill it out, I will make a point around flat spots, right? I think it is unachievable for most people to turn a flat spot into your biggest strength. So I would not go after that. I tell people, when you have a flat spot, especially if somebody's pointed it out to you so they notice, just make it not noticeable. Make it not annoying to other people, right? Make it something that's just okay about you. You're still going to have your strengths, right? But make the flat spot just not something that people talk about, right? And that's your really main goal in this. So yeah, so we've got 5. I don't.
Looks like 3 and 5 are about tied. The communications and business transformation.
Okay, this is excellent. So it gives us some. This actually is really helpful data for those of us at SASE, because we can orient some of our work more on the areas that maybe you want to hone your strengths or work on some flat spots. And I'd really encourage each of you to really think about your answers to that in the next section of this. Parag, if I close this poll, is that going to mess anything up? Can you save
go ahead and close it.
Okay. So the last piece I'm going to cover very quickly is, how do we take this conceptual framework, which is, very high level, to work for each and every one of you, right? So, and I'm not going to give you a form, but I'm going to encourage you to take anything that you're thinking about here, your assessment on strengths and flat spots, create a personal plan to develop your leadership, okay? First, you got to know yourself. Like, who are you? Where are you? What are people talking about you? Not just what you think, but what's going on around you, right? And that's all about engaging with others. There's a couple of very interesting things here. One, when you engage with others, and we'll talk about who those others are, you're going to build relationships. I mean, being vulnerable and asking somebody like, hey, I'm trying to work on myself as a leader. Can you tell me what you see? The good, bad, the ugly. First, it builds a relationship, because if they're doing it to you, you'll have a deeper bond that will serve you well later. Second, it will create a mutual understanding, right? Maybe you learn something that you didn't know about yourself, and that's data that you can use to operate in new and different ways. The other more important point is that it allows you to see yourself as others do. This is a very, very important concept, and one of the coaches that I enlisted, this was her central methodology, right? So I show a picture. This is the picture I use for myself. This is how I see me. Why? Because I go look in a mirror. This is exactly what I see. And I see myself in what I think is my true self. Actually, when others see me, they see a caricature of me, right? So it's still me. You can still, besides my name being there, you can still tell this is me. But there are some things and some features on the caricature that are a little more enhanced, you know, my nose, my chin, whatever, right? And because people are going to see more of you in certain aspects and less in others. And the converse, it's not, there's no right answer. The conversation is, how do you close the gap between how you see yourself and how others see you, so that people see the true you? Okay, that becomes very operative in terms of how you work on your own leadership. But this is all about engaging with others, so you fill out the data that you're collecting on yourself. And then the last one is really being attentive to context, right? Context matters. And we'll talk a little bit about that here in this slide, right? Context is who you are and where you sit in an organization, because your context will affect your development plan. And I'm just going to throw up some of the different context factors that I think about, like where are you in your career stage? Where are you in your level? Are you entry? Are you already aspiring to be a manager? Are you already a manager? What's your orientation to your job? Do you work individually, or are you already a manager of people? Gender roles play heavily into personal context, because, you know, certain perceptions are formed purely based on gender, and delivery results based on gender, right? What sector you work in. I worked in CPG. I know certain things are rewarded more and more fluent. I have not worked in some of these other areas, but I'm imagining every sector and every company within a sector has a slightly different reward structure, a slightly different culture. So that context is important. I moved from fabric care within P&G to beauty care within P&G. Honestly, it was like working for a completely different company. The risk tolerance was very different. The level of technical depth and rigor was very different. I had to make a major adjustment in how I worked as a leader, just based on moving a business unit within the same company, within the same city, with people I already knew really well, okay? So just imagine when you hop to a different company or a different sector, the relearning you have to do on this stuff. Ethnic identity, obviously, you know, your cultural and ethnic background, where you are on the journey of U.S. assimilation. You know, I'm second gen, there's some of you that are first gen, some of you that are beyond that. And then, you know, we talked a little bit about how the ERGs can help, and it depends on where the ERG is going on in your company, right? So not that you have to overthink it, but you do be thoughtful, and I may have missed some factors that are important. Think about the context that you're operating in, okay? The last really brief poll is, I want to go back to this question of engaging others and ask you to think about who are the stakeholders that you want to engage with to help define your plan. And I've offered a number of choices here, so, you know, I'd love to see and hear what you have to say about that.
We've got about a little over almost 70 responses in, and it looks like myself is at the top, along with my mentor as number 2, or I'm sorry, my direct manager is number 2, closely followed by my mentor.
Right, thanks, Parag. And what I would say, there's no right or wrong answer. Please do not make it only yourself. The process of engaging others who have information to share with you is absolutely critical and essential. So please, you know, use all stakeholders, and the more the merrier. Okay, and that's it. So, you know, we talked a little bit about leadership, and, you know, starting with my Google searches and our executive interviews, how that culminated in a framework that we want to use within SASE to guide leadership development programming on the difference makers to help you grow and achieve higher positions in your company. And most importantly, taking that conceptual framework and putting it into action for yourself through engaging others and thinking about your context. Okay, that's really all I had to share. I want to close just with a few acknowledgements. I mean, this work was not mine alone. As I've been preaching to you, I've been engaging a lot of other people in this journey over the last 3 or 4 months. Many of the executives that we're working with in SASE, some of the training partners that we've engaged with. I did not put names of our industry partners because there's just too many to count. And then, of course, the staff within SASE. Parag has been a great sounding board. Dennis, I think I acknowledged Sarah, who really put together the graphic design. So thanks again, Sarah, for that work. And yeah, if you have any thoughts or comments on any of this, it's what I would call, it's still kind of wet cement. I'd like to do more to peel the onion back some more, make it stronger, make it more rigorous, open to input. I don't know, Parag, I didn't put my email on here. I should have done that. But I think you all know how to reach me. If you don't, catch me on LinkedIn or talk to Parag. He can get you over to me in a hurry. But thank you guys all so much for your attention. And Parag, I'm gonna turn it back over to you to close us out.
Yep. Thank you very much. Hopefully you can see my screen. I apologize. It is right at 5 o'clock, so I probably asked one too many questions. If you can hold with me, that'd be fantastic. Our national conference is coming up. You see the dates up here. You can register today. Conference.saseconnect.org. Our professional track, which is from October 28th to 30th, is building off of this leadership framework that Uday just shared today. So we've organized everything around those 5 tracks of programming. So as you develop your plan, you can look at the specific topics that we've organized and build out your conference accordingly. We'll have 50+ hours of live stream, fast-paced interactive content. Content will be recorded, and therefore the parallel training that you weren't able to attend, you'll be able to view within 30 days. There are 10+ of the top API leadership trainers. You see their logos below. And we've just got all sorts of offerings for you. We're really taking the virtual nature to heart and exploiting it in a sense to be able to deliver all sorts of content that we actually couldn't do in an in-person world. So we're very excited about this conference coming up. Some examples of panels and workshops up here. I won't read through them all, but there's a lot of words, and the whole point is there's a lot. We've got a lot coming your way to be able to help our community. Most of these topics were actually selected with the ERGs inputting and upvoting and downvoting along with us. So we've really catered this to our community. Lastly, we've done this before. We're not starting from scratch. Last year, we had some phenomenal results. You can see some of the companies who've engaged with us in a really big way, and we thank them for engaging with us last year and doing the same this year. Really strong feedback scores that we want to build off of even this year. Lots of states, lots of folks US born, foreign born, everyone is seeing value out of what we're doing. And so I wanted to give you that glimpse and then also invite you to the next webinar, which will be on September 15th. The guys, Jim Lee and Abraham Jin from Bespoke, who will be doing 2 to 3 sessions, I believe, during our national conference. They've agreed to give us a little bit of a teaser for free. You can register there. I put the link in the chat, so it's open, you can register today. And feel free to share that with others, with your own networks, within the companies, and whatnot. Lastly, you can always see what's going on through this link with the webinar, but real quick, we'd like some feedback polls. Roland, if you can toss up the feedback poll real quick. There are 2 questions on it. So please, do the first one and then scroll down to the second one. And as they come in, I will go ahead and move forward. You are welcome to join the SASE family at any point when we can get back in person, our in-person conferences. You can imagine 3,000, 4,000 Asians descending on a small city in the Midwest. Always fun and always uplifting to see our community come together. So while we can't do that this year, we are actively looking forward to catching up together in person in Atlanta next year. And in the meantime, we do have this virtual conference coming up. You can connect with us on Facebook, on the web, on LinkedIn, or send any emails to pro@saseconnect.org. If you're affiliated with a company who has not engaged with us from an ERG level, please do reach out to me, and we can chat a bit more about how SASE can partner with your Asian ERG to deliver against your initiatives. And with that, thank you so much. Really appreciate you hanging out with us. And if you want to ask some questions or whatnot, I'll be here for a little bit more. And with that, we can go ahead and stop the recording. And again, have a great day and hope to see you next time.